Sustainability is just not about human beings, but it's about nature.
So sustainability is really about being sensible, direct, seeing what you have around you and implementing that in a way.
A wall could be built with anything, but there are people who are enjoying, building walls with concrete. Huge, massive waste of resources.
The rich people air conditioning their buildings, it is the poor people who are actually getting affected.
Having an economic strength to be able to support an old building is very important. And I think we need to find solutions to make something like maintenance of these buildings more affordable for the end users.
How do we convince, as architects, how do we convince clients, whether it's the end user of a house or whether it's a commercial complex, how do we convince clients on this more versus less debate?
And I think if you look at Hinduism, it's actually, its roots are in nature and understanding, the simplicity and sacredness of nature and being in tune with that thing. So can we actually make architecture sacred? Can we actually, put these sort of guidelines?
If we worship nature, we'll know more about sustainability.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in. So I'm Gopika Pramod, Managing Editor of the Architect's Diary, and I'll be the moderator for today. So we are going to start with the first panel discussion of the day by the name Redefining the Meaning of Sustainable Architecture. So I would like to welcome all the speakers onto the stage, please. So let's get started with the theme of our event, which is redefining the meaning of sustainable architecture. In India, sustainable architecture is undergoing a profound transformation, no longer limited to green building certifications or eco-friendly materials. It now embraces a broader, more integrated approach. This redefinition draws from India's deep-rooted traditions of vernacular architecture, where structures are built in harmony with the region's climate, environment, and cultural practices. In the Indian context, sustainability also extends beyond environmental concerns to address social equity and economic viability. It involves designing buildings that uplift the communities, provide affordable housing solutions, and create spaces for public urbanization, engagement, all while fostering a connection to nature and culture. As India faces rapid urbanization, climate challenges, and resource scarcity, this holistic redefinition of sustainable architecture becomes essential for building a future that is not only eco conscious but also deeply rooted in Indian values and local context. On this note, I would like to introduce to our esteemed panelists for today. So, we first have Eugene Pandala from CSBNE. Eugene Pandala is an architect, urban designer, and heritage conservator celebrated for his commitment to biodiversity and environmentally sustainable practices. His passion for conserving natural heritage has fueled his exploration of affordable, sustainable development and architecture. Eugene's architectural philosophy embraces minimalism, eco-sensitivity, and artistry, creating organic structures that harmonize with their surroundings. By prioritizing the use of local materials and techniques, his designs foster a cultural continuity that respects the context of each region. His buildings, which forge a deep connection with nature, are climate responsive and environmentally friendly. Hello, Eugene, sir. Welcome to the panel discussion. Uh, it's an honor to have you with us. So next
Yeah,
we have Dean De Cruz. Next we have Dean De Cruz from Mozaic Design. Dean De Cruz is a graduate of architecture and is actively involved in professional practice as well as in academics. He's a partner and principal architect in Mozaic, a leading design firm based in Goa, involved in urban intervention, architecture, conservation, product, and graphic design. Mosaic strives to provide holistic solutions to its patrons. They explore prospects of symbolic growth of the clients with nature, encouraging sustainable practices in design. Hello, Deed, sir. Welcome you on to the
Yeah,
panel.
hi. Hi, Eugene. Hi, Trupti. Sorry I haven't had a chance to meet you, Shipra, but yeah, hello, everyone. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you with us today. So next we have Trupti Doshi from Auroma Architecture. Trupti Doshi received a Bachelor of Architecture degree from the University of Mumbai and is currently based in Auroville, Pondicherry. As the principal architect of Auroma architecture, her expertise includes climate responsive architecture, appropriate materials and building technologies, rainwater harvesting, waste management, energy efficiency, thermal comfort, and the use of renewables. Trupti has lectured extensively across India and internationally, driven by the passion of a change maker. Her TEDx talk in India, titled Making Smart Cities Before Making Buildings Smart, received widespread acclaim and represented India at the inaugural Women TEDx event in Greece. She has been the chief co architect of Sri Aurobindo Society for over 12 years, where she played a key role in master planning numerous large institutional projects spanning several hundred acres. Hello, Trupti, ma'am. Great
Hi,
to have you
Gopika.
today.
Thank you for having me. And hi, Dean. Lovely to see you. Hi, Eugene. Hello, Shipra.
Okay, so let's move on to the fourth panelist, Shipra Singhania from Sketch Design Studio. Shipra's journey began in Lucknow, where she developed a deep appreciation for traditional art forms and heritage. Armed with a degree in interior and spatial design from institutions like University of Arts London and Rachna Sansad, Mumbai, she embarked on a mission to revive ancient techniques. Her passion for natural building projects took root in Rajasthan, where she championed the use of indigenous materials and techniques. By promoting sustainable design practices and preserving the region's architectural craft heritage, Shipra's work stands as a testament to her commitment to sustainability and tradition. Hi, Shipra, welcome.
Hi, Gopika.
So
Thank
pleased
you
to
so
have
much for
you.
having me here today. It is an honor to be sharing a same platform from with Eugene sir, Trupti ma'am, and Dean sir. I have followed your work for a very long time, and it feels fabulous to be here.
Lovely
So
to
great
see
to
you,
hear.
Shipra.
Yes. So before we begin, I would like to ask all our listeners to comment their questions in the chat box because we'll be having a 5-minute Q&A session after the panel discussion. Also, don't forget to subscribe to TAD Originals for more exclusive content and events. So let's begin with the panel discussion, shall we? Okay.
Go ahead,
Uh,
Gopika.
so, so the first segment is sustainability, a buzzword or today's need. So, when you talk about sustainability or the theme redefining sustainable architecture, we need to first ask what does sustainability mean in today's world? So, and how has it evolved over the years? So, let's start with Eugene, sir. Since you have been a part, you have been started your practice even when the term sustainability was quite foreign in India. So, I would like to know how do you define sustainability and how has it been through your practice?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dean, Doshi and Singhania. Thank you for being with us. So, I mean, all this thing of sustainability started after we started facing this problem of global warming. That is when we started, thinking about the kind of carbon. We started realizing that the carbon that we emit is after industrial revolution has really is creating problems for us. Not only for human beings but also for the entire biodiversity. The whole planet, the entire biodiversity in the planet is getting hurt. So initially, we started thinking of about us human beings. We started there, and we came to know about the threats that we are facing. Global warming is many even now. We have people who don't agree with this idea of global warming, but now very recently people have started. Everyone has started getting that kind of everything. Everybody is getting hurt because of this climate change and climate crisis. We started calling it as a climate crisis, and that is the beginning of it. And in US they started this initiative. The industries came together and started an initiative called the Green Building Certified Leads. That's a LEED certified building. They started calling it as a green initiative, and everyone started calling something happening for nature as green, and they took it up and leads standardized process of building green. And in India, IGBC started this initiative of standardizing industrial products to make the buildings green. That's how things started, But as a matter of fact, whatever buildings and environment that we intervened before industrial revolution was all sustainable. Sustainability is just not about human beings, but it's about nature. Only after the industrial revolution, when we started building our structures with cement, steel, glass, and all this carbon-based usage of energy to produce materials, we got into this problem. So the challenge is now to mitigate, carbon emission. For that, we have to. That's the way it came forward, and everyone started talking about carbon emissions and linking that to the products in the industry, and all this green initiatives have become very expensive. It's not affordable for common man. So if we start building, certified green buildings or certified structures, only maybe 5 or 6% of the population of the country can afford it, and that is not going to achieve this. It's not going to mitigate climate change. What we want is we should offer technologies for everyone to build sustainably, to live sustainably. And that is basically we have to start with the lifestyle modification. Like, people started thinking about, when we had this problem of hypertension, they used to create tablets to solve the problems. Doctors never used to say about, you go and it's a lifestyle disease, you go and change your habits. Like you go for a walk, that can give you, there are a lot of lifestyle diseases like that. So we are also having a lifestyle disease for the planet Earth. And we are just thinking about ourselves. We're just thinking about human beings, which is very unfair. Like biodiversity, we are dependent on everything that is surrounding us. Everything. And we are losing a lot of species because of this climate change. And it is very obvious, a lot of studies. So that is how we have come moving forward now. And the way forward has to be sustainability for everyone. There's no point in calling green and calling it for certified green buildings. If you have to make your buildings green, then you have to go for a certification. That's what the government is doing, which is it's very unfair. It's not right. It's not the right way of moving forward. We have to give sustainable solutions. We have to tell people that everything that we did, you don't have to certify a mud structure. Foolishly, some people have done good buildings with the natural materials, and foolishly going to the IGBC for certification to say that this is a green structure. See, we have foundations, technology to build foundations without cement or concrete. We had mud foundation technology. We had the best solutions for poor soil conditions, like where you need piling. We could go for structural systems which could be done by natural materials. That was there, that is tradition. And we have lots of materials which is available, material and technology that is available traditionally to deal with solutions of structure. Unfortunately, we are just getting into some kind of, we now have only solutions with concrete and steel and glass and cement. I mean, we know that. But that is what is happening in the School of Architecture also. What is being taught. We can't blame the architects, the new generation architects. I was taught with, to make buildings with concrete. Dean also must be. I mean, even those days we used to enjoy, say, cubism was the kind of thing, concrete, building with concrete. And now, even now, you have people who know only to build with concrete. A wall could be built with anything, But there are people who are enjoying, building walls with concrete. Huge, massive waste of resources. And steel. Of course, steel is much more sustainable than concrete, but still, this is the kind of, the materials that people are enjoying, unfortunately. So that is the general, initial thoughts about. I just, I think you people also can put in more to
If I can
expand.
intervene here, I mean, I think you need to know timelines over here. So Eugene and myself would probably, joined architecture almost 50 years ago. So at that time, the word sustainability was never really used by anyone over there. So everything was being about, sensible about. In fact, Eugene and myself actually shared the same partner, of course, at different points of time. And of course, you can see the influence of Baker in, both our works. And Baker's approach is just plain, simpleness and directness, which and a sensible sort of approach to architecture, which we're missing today. And really, when people ask me, is there one word that you can describe sustainability all about? And being low cost, which Baker propounded. So I think it's important that we take cost into account. And when we talk about, a lot of times sustainability should not cost more. It needs to be something which is, sensible, something which, unfortunately, when we take cost, we don't take environmental cost. We don't take the cost of the environment. That comes free to us. Whatever nature pays in terms of cutting down trees or destroying or polluting the environment, that is never taken into account. So how does one actually, take that as part of your, costing into whatever you spend on? And when you talk about sustainability, I mean, of course, one of Baker's principles was really using the resources that you had. And the major resource that we had is really, manpower. And sort of protecting, the skill bases that we had in whichever area we worked in. So sustainability is really about being sensible, direct, seeing what you have around you and implementing that in a way. Now, of course, it's become a much misused term because it's, material manufacturers and, technology providers have started this rating system, as Eugene said, and really a lot of those things are very suspect. Yeah. And even though, say, lead rating systems or Terry are very noble sort of efforts to try and bring about awareness of that thing, a lot of times they miss out on the points. But one needs to look at that as almost like learning a vocabulary. Like those are the basic keywords that you have, and do you respond to them in a way, whether it's energy or materials or and how do you actually take that into account? But as Eugene also said, there's so much of the past which has that sensibility which we've forgotten, and of course the time we studied it was this brave new world of let's try these new materials and new forms of concrete, steel, whatever new materials are coming to the market, which is fine at that time. But I think we've now realized that this is really not the way, and the greater challenges that are coming about. There's a need for mass housing throughout the country, and these materials may not be able to provide the correct solutions for it. So how do we tap into whatever local resources there are and create an architecture that's fairly effective? Yeah, that's my opinion.
Thank you. I really agree with both of you on that aspect because it's definitely a need of the hour right now. It's not just a trend or a buzzword. So it is important to address this and redefine the meaning of sustainability and speak about it more. So Trupti, yes, hi. Uh, so how do you define sustainable architecture?
So you had sent out this really beautiful note on the email, and I particularly loved the word that you had mentioned. That sustainability, yes, all of us look at the triple bottom line: people, planet, profit. All of us are looking at that. But I think what is very important, especially in the Indian context, because we are such a diverse and a culturally rich country, that cultural relevance is very, very important in sustainability. You can't have a one size fits all. And as Eugene beautifully said, that yes, these ways of, and Dean also mentioned about the certification, that yes, they are definitely important. But at the same time, you can't have a one size fits all approach. You can't have something that is applicable in, let's say, where Shipra is working in Rajasthan to where Dean is working in Goa. I mean, the climates are totally different. the approaches are totally different. So I remember a very kind of a poignant incident when about 15, 20 years ago, I was designing this large brick a large mud campus, about 5-7 acres. And the entire campus was built locally out of the very soil on which it stands. And as Eugene so beautifully said right now, that you can't certify a mud structure, right? It's downright inappropriate to certify that. But because the client was saying, no, we want a certification, I was forced to go to Griha. And Griha actually said something like, we can't give you a certification because you've scored 104 points out of 100. So we can't give you a certification. If you were at 80, 85, we would have given you a 5-star or the platinum rating equivalent. But because you scored 104, we can't give you anything. So that was the absurdity of it, you know. So just coming back to the point of cultural relevance, that culturally relevant buildings are so important in our country. I mean, otherwise it's like if we just follow certifications, I dread the day when after 50 years we all end up becoming cookie cutter houses like the US. You know, I mean, that would be a dreadful time to live in India. Because I remember the last time I was at my brother's house in Tampa, in Florida, and Miami, and the first time I was there, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I was so uncomfortable because everywhere I used to take like long walks around the city. Everywhere it's the same house, just a little different roof, and it's the same house, one after the other, and I was like getting literally in this completely open space. I was getting completely choked. So, you know, the sense of place is, I think, very, very critical. So, yes, people, planet, profit, yes, but I think cultural relevance is very important. Thanks, Gopika.
Yes, it's a
Continue.
different take. Like, it's very important to be like it is culturally relevant. Like every city, every town, every place has a different context, and we need to design as per the context. So, Shipra, like from your location, that is from Rajasthan, how do you define sustainable architecture? Since you have been working with natural materials, how has it been for you?
So I think what Trupti ma'am was talking about cultural relevance, I think it is a very, very important factor. What is also important is how community behaves when we talk about sustainable architecture. So community is the sense in the sense of people we are building for as designers and architects, people we are building with. It's also very important with the team that is working to build a particular structure, how devoted they are towards these kind of efforts. Are they really interested, or they're just like doing it for the money? So I think the whole idea of building around the community and with the community is very important when we talk about this. A little anecdote: when I was building my first mud house, that time when I came up with the idea and I spoke about it with my parents and everyone, and I said that I want to build this house out of mud because it seems a very interesting material. I was researching it for a project which was not happening, so let me just do it myself. And we had a mason who I invited and asked him if he can build with me. And the first thing he went and told my dad was that कोई guarantee नहीं है मिट्टी के घर का, अगर टूट गया तो आप मेरे को मत बोलना. So it's so important because a person who is about 70 years old today, who has actually seen these materials being used when he was a child, and having this kind of a perspective towards these materials, talk a lot about how community it's important to for the community to be able to understand the real meaning of sustainability.
Definitely, like the word is different, like every way in every context, it's quite different. So even the word mud, when someone tells mud house, they think that it's not strong or it's not stable. But you have actually proved that it is. So there are definitely technological aspect, or you can just derive from the tradition. our culture to make sure that these materials last in our context, in our present times as well. So moving on to the next question, we there is another approach to sustainability, that it is a way of life more than a design intervention. Like how all of you, like Eugene sir and Dean sir, have mentioned about LEED certification, and how they are all like, people are, it's all just check marks and tick marks, like how to include all these points, and then only your building becomes sustainable. So people add green walls and tell their building is sustainable. So do you think people have actually, or the society has actually accepted that sustainability is considered a way of life than a design intervention in present times?
Yeah, if I can go first, yeah.
Yes,
So
definitely.
basically, yeah. So I think, yeah, lifestyle is an extremely important thing, because it determines how much of a footprint that we have. I mean, how large our homes are, what are the sort of conveniences that we want. Do we want it air conditioned? What sort of finishes do we want? So that's an extremely important aspect of sustainability, because those choices actually affect what's happening around us. You can see that, for to sustain America, you need 3 Earths really. So it's because of the high level of consumption of all these resources. So if we are able to change these lifestyles, it will be a major change. And India is really at the cusp at making that decision, because we have a growing middle class, which is also demanding, which is very aspirational, and they're going to make these wrong choices. They're going to want those marble floors, they want the air conditioning. I mean, you see that, like, the air conditioning in India, they estimate that the air conditioning energy that's needed for India in the next 10 years is the electrical consumption of the whole of Africa shortly. So you can imagine the amount of air conditioning, because global warming is happening. People are getting wealthier; they can afford air conditioning. I mean, it's growing exponentially. The need for this thing, and it's a comfort thing. In sort of 50 years ago, nobody even thought of air conditioning. Cars are not being air conditioned. Everyone is now, we're pampered. No doubt, things are getting warmer, but not dramatically so that we need air conditioning. And we glaze our buildings in, we lock in that hot air, and then we want to air condition it. And of course, you get these pandemic things of poor air circulation. So we need to look back and see, how we handle these issues before. How can we get to a simpler way of life? Because it is a crisis situation. We've crossed that 360 parts per million in terms of carbon thing. We're completely downhill. There's no way we can save the planet. It's just a question of just putting the brakes. So for mankind to survive a little longer, I mean, it's doomsday virtually. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but we have to, as much as we can mitigate it, we need to make that effort. And lifestyle is a big way in actually addressing this.
Definitely, like comfort, people are just like sacrificing the planet in the name of comfort, and they are installing ACs in the name of comfort. But is it really needed in this present times? Is something we need to think about. So, Eugene sir, what do you think about what Dean sir said right now?
Yes, lifestyle modification is the best way to heal so many problems or diseases, and the disease for the planet. This global warming. I feel we have to be more optimistic about it, especially if you are more concerned about the next generation. Grandchildren and grandchildren. The thing is moving so fast that it's very difficult to get a turnaround now. Looks like. So this air conditioner, Dean was talking about this AC. I was avoiding AC till last year. Last year was terrible. I'm living in a mud structure. You can see that. I was using all kind of passive management of heat and all that. Last year was terrible. I have a lot of trees around my house. I'm living inside a forest, but still, it was terrible. So this thing is going to drive us crazy. This climate change, this global warming. It's going to hurt us in so many ways, different ways. Like it's going to hit our resources. It's going to the climate is going wild. You never saw this kind of hurricanes and twisters earlier. So this floods that's happening, cloudburst that is happening, like it was never before. This kind of So, I mean, we have to be worried about it. Lifestyle, every person should do something about, at least should know that he should be able to cut on the carbon emission. So people now have justification that, you put an AC and you put your, make solar panels on top of your house. Okay, that's a fine, good thing that if you can be off the grid, reduce carbon emissions, if you're not generating power from fossil fuel, if you can use your own solar energy for cooling yourself. But still, it's not the right way of doing it. Like that's like taking pills, shortcuts, like what we take for diabetics. If you walk, that's also a lifestyle disease. But you have to pop in tablets to eat the way in which we are taught. That's the thing. You're taught in certain ways. You have to feed three times a day. That's also a part of lifestyle. So one could live just by eating only once a day. And if you could manage your weight and do sufficient amount of exercise, you don't have to pop in diabetic tablet. They say it's a lifestyle disease, but they don't advise. But we want advice to change our lifestyle to suit the planet also. Not just the planet means like we just don't. We have to think more about others also. Others means not human beings, but biodiversity. Everything that lives, everything that depends on the planet. We are dependent. It's all connected. We have a narrow vision. We don't see other things. Others are important. Others means the living organisms around us. So cutting a tree, cutting a tree is just not cutting a tree. A tree holds a large number of biodiversity. Lot of living organisms depend in that live in that nice piece of creation. Under the tree, you have nowadays. Now only we have realized that there is a communication link between the roots, between different trees, and they share resources. A tree community of, number of trees is not just number of trees in the site. It's a community of trees. They share. So we just shamelessly, like cut a tree and then plant 50 trees. That's not the way we should do. We have to think more than that about the microorganisms that depend on that tree. It's a living. It's just not a single individual stuff like the green building or the leads or the things about. We had to give more thought to it. Or
Definitely,
ancient system was ancient system was much more.
yes,
The
definitely.
religion was basically like worshipping nature. That was the right kind of thing, because now in today's context, if we worship nature, we'll know more about sustainability. Before cutting a tree, we had some procedures. But it's not the Vastu kind of thing that you talk about, but the actual Vastu means Prakriti, not hurting the nature and taking the goodness of nature, enjoying it nicely, but not hurting it at all. It had a very broad, beautiful sense. The trees were, very. You had sacred groves attached to. In a community we had in Kerala also we had this. Every household had a small space for the biodiversity to live in. It's called the sacred grove, or it's called as Kava, where that was the repository of the biodiversity, which used to be beneficial in terms of for Ayurvedic purpose. We used to depend on those kind of plant proteins and animal proteins. Ayurveda
Definitely,
was
yes, yes,
basically
Ayurveda.
linked to that. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Our culture is quite linked to sustainability. Like our old culture was definitely linked to it. But right now, considering our climate change, are we really late when it comes to addressing sustainability, or do we still have a chance? Shipra, what do you think about this?
Well, I think we need to be optimistic. Although South Asia is one of the most affected part of the world when it comes to global warming, when it comes to climate change. We are experiencing it today. This year, Rajasthan crossed 50 temperature degrees, and we also are experiencing a lot of monsoons, which is destroying the agriculture. It is also affecting structures and buildings. So we are already seeing this, but it's important that we understand the need of the hour. It's important that we understand how we can help shape a built environment which can deal with the biodiversity issues which we have only created through our methods and means, and try and not just plant more trees but conserve the biodiversity, like Eugene sir was saying, and conserve the life around us. That's what most people are not able to understand. There are a lot of tree plantation drives around the country, but what about conserving, and what about using and praying to nature and understanding the importance of the smallest of creatures like earthworms also. So I think that's most important. But and yeah, we need to spread more and more awareness, and have people understand the importance.
Definitely, like it's not just about trees. There's a lot more to do about sustainability and climate change. So you had Trupti, ma'am, you had spoken about cultural context. So how do you think, like is it a way of life? How can we improve our way of life in terms of culture?
See, one of the things I think I'm grappling in my as we are evolving, all of us as architects, one of the things I'm grappling with right now is that the whole push for consumerism and capitalism and generally the way of life itself is to do more, be more, get more, earn more, have more. And as climate activists, and I've been an activist in the past, we are talking about have less, live with less. So the whole idea of abundance, and also this whole thing is coming from a kind of a sense of resources are dwindling away, and we have to manage with less, and population is growing. So this kind of so to say, a balancing act of how do we convince as architects, how do we convince clients, whether it's the end user of a house or whether it's a commercial complex, how do we convince clients on this more versus less debate? I mean, that's something that I'm grappling with right now. And to second Dean's beautiful point about air conditioning, what he said, in the next 10 years India is going to be requiring that much air conditioning. I just quickly did some research while we discussing that in 2015 the number of room ACs in India was 32 million, and by 2035, which is in 20 years, it's going to go up from 32 million to, guess what? Any guesses, anyone? How much it's going to go up by? I mean, I was zapped when I saw that number right now. But from 32 million, it's going to go up to 225 million.
Wow.
The number of room ACs alone. And commercial ACs, which was 9 million TR in 2015, is going to go up 12x to 104 million TR in 2035. So, as architects, I think, as Eugene rightly mentioned, that it has to be a way of life. It can't be only for those 5% buildings which get certified. What happens to the remaining buildings which don't get certified? Unless it becomes a way of life for us, this kind of crazy air conditioning load increases. I mean, you can't stop it. So unless as architects and as users also, unless we educate the general public on what it means to be sustainable, I think it's a joint effort. We as architects, we can't save the earth by ourselves. So definitely it's a joint effort. And yeah, the numbers were just blew me away.
Yeah,
Definitely, these numbers are really scary. Yes, sir, Dean, sir. Just
If I can take that forward, Trupti, I mean, so you've heard about the heat island effect. So, and you look at your air conditioning, especially in cities. Now, when you cool the inside of a building, you're obviously heating the outside. And all this heat, which is actually going to be dissipating onto the street or the surrounding building area, is actually creating and increasing the load of the air conditioners. So they estimate that in cities, besides the air conditioning cost, it's going to go up by 20% because the heat outside is even higher because of the air conditioning. So those numbers may even need to be increased further. So it's important that we really understand these things, that it's air conditioning is the wrong way, and of course the way we design. So can we actually really look at systems which are far more passive in nature? And earlier this point was brought up about biodiversity. I mean, we're losing. Eugene mentioned this thing about trees, and so trees have this network of mycelium which is underground. So they communicate through these mycelium to the various. If you need more water, other trees would provide nutrients to it, or start shifting in a certain direction to survive in such a way. They recognize when another tree is dying, and of course, they live off that dead matter of the previous tree. So there is this intricate communication system between trees, which we need to recognize. And we as architects need to be responsible about how much we're destroying. So I think one method which some architects do is really mapping the biodiversity of a site before they actually start building. So what are we taking away from it, whether it's the trees, the birds, the earthworms, or whatever? Map that, and can we restore it in some way? Can we restore it? So some people, in terms of green building, are looking at the footprint of the building. Can we restore it on the terrace? Can we restore it on the surface of the building? So can we produce the same amount of oxygen that was on that land? Can we sequester the amount of carbon dioxide that nature had on that pristine piece of land? So how can that be done? I think that's extremely important that we understand that. And since you mentioned the thing of cultural, how do we actually draw from culture? And it was mentioned, I think, in the next question, really respecting elements of nature and inspiration from its culture. And I think if you look at Hinduism, its roots are in nature and understanding, the simplicity and sacredness of nature and being in tune with that thing. So can we actually make architecture sacred? Can we actually, put these sort of guidelines, just we have these rituals, can we actually, create that sacredness which will make people follow it? Because they're not going to just look at a lead thing. They say, oh, it's too foreign, or this griyas, maybe it is too technical. But we actually put these checks in that, that respect nature in a way and make it almost that, religious, if I may say so, such that people start adhering to it. I mean, there's this great fear of religion now that, okay, fine, we have to sort of, adhere to these things to be, part of society. And if we can actually do that and introduce a sustainability in a manner which, almost guides people to undertake these, steps, I think that really could, make a difference. Yeah, thank you.
Definitely.
I'll just come in here for a minute because Dean raised 3 brilliant points. Dean, to your first point, when you said that how the air conditioning is actually increasing the heat outside the building, it brings in the point of climate justice, in the sense that by the rich people air conditioning their buildings, it is the poor people who are actually getting affected, because the slum dwellers cannot afford air conditioning. So, what are we doing with climate justice? So that was one very beautiful point that you brought about. To your second point, mapping biodiversity, do you know people who map it? Because I need those people. If you have those people, please tell me where they are and who they are. And Eugene, sir, if you or Shipra, anybody who knows people who map biodiversity, where can we do it?
See, what I do is for every project, especially larger projects, mostly, say, hospitality projects, I do a biodiversity study. That's a very important part of my itinerary. It's just studying the cultural aspects of the community around that space. This is also very important for me, the kind of biodiversity that we have there. The birds and the butterflies, the flora and the fauna, the listing of that. All these things are taken into account, and the importance of every small things that is happening there. And if if I see a tree, I just don't ignore it just like that, but I look in for nesting. And whatever we can see with the naked eyes, that these kind of things, that plus the data that we get from there. It's a mandatory thing in my office to do such a study we do any intervention. Intervention is something that's what we are doing. Like when we are doing a project, we can call it as an intervention to nature. It's a intervention to natural heritage. Just not the cultural heritage is just not the only thing that we should take care of, but we have to take care of the natural heritage. Most importantly, I think that's also important. These two things should go, side by side.
Eugene, is there a methodology that you follow, or is there a way you have, or do you know people who do this biodiversity mapping of number of butterflies, number of birds, number of species in that region before and after?
We study it. We study it.
Okay.
I make it a point to gather data from that location. We should not only visually, the data that is available from gazetteers, that is one place from where you get all the information of a particular locality. The Britishers had done extensive research on all these things.
Is there any agency which supplies this data, or?
No, we have to do lot of research. That is a part of for every districts, every places, every place you have a gazetteer, which will have some kind of information. That's something to start with. And then you can actually also gather, the available information from the state database.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. For example, what we do, I mean, we work a lot in the jungle. We design a lot of jungle resorts across the country, mainly in Madhya Pradesh. And we collaborate with Mohan Rao of Indy. So he's a landscape architect. But landscape is generally misunderstood. When you think of landscape architect, it's all these pretty little bushes in the line, a couple of stones around the park.
Flowering plants and making a place beautiful with flowers and things like that. That should not be landscape architecture.
Yeah. So fortunately, there are.
What I say is, it should not be. Nobody should intervene. In any place, I would say that intervention should be minimal. If there are trees already,
there are a few landscape architects who actually approach it from an ecological perspective and actually, map, what is possible in the area. So even if it's lost in the area, what does the surrounding area consist of? And can you actually restore that area and increase its, biodiversity if possible? So I think that's important that we engage with such people. We may not have that the capabilities in-house, as an architectural firm, but actually there are people that we sort of bring on board and respect, for their knowledge in these areas, and then ensure that our architecture responds to that.
Yeah.
We are also
Maybe I'll take a few more names from you, Dean, after this meeting.
Sure. Yeah.
We are also working.
The next point, actually, which is on the list, which is at point number 4 in segment 1, I think is an extremely important one too.
I would just like.
Yes, Shipra, yes.
Well, I would just like to put in that we are working on a project which is in Madhya Pradesh, and we've been doing a similar study. We took about a month to study the flora and fauna. And horticulture, there are a lot of people who specialize in horticulture study, and they have immense information about flora and fauna around the land. And we actually went on the site and we studied each and every tree, the animals that are living on the tree. We found red ant homes on the tree ourselves. There were monkey homes, trees there where monkeys were living in. Also, as far as I know, Zoological Survey of India also helps you do a study. If you want a biodiversity study, they'll also give you the natives, trees, the species that live on that particular land. And if you want to actually enhance the biodiversity in a more ecological way, they can also give you suggestions on how to enhance that.
Super, thanks, I'll look into that. Yeah.
So definitely, more than it's not more than interventions, more of restoration. Like what is lost, we need to bring it back as well. So that was a really good point. And as we had already discussed about the elements of nature and how Eugene sir rightly said about the sacred groves and our old heritage or our old culture of Ayurveda and many things that are rooted to sustainability. How can we derive or take inspiration from this culture in modern day sustainability?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that briefly. So can we make it sacred in a way, that we're drawing culture into the thing? And I think that ability, I mean, like for example, the Tulsi plant, it's a celebration really, I mean, it's got now a very ritualistic, sort of symbol to it. But I think it's rooted in this thing of really we respect the, what nature has given us and make sure that, it's passed on from generation to generation. And I think that the usefulness of nature is one way of course expressing. For those who are hardcore things, who don't really care much, but at least you can say this tree is useful for this. It gives you food, it gives you oxygen, whatever it is, it gives you. But besides that, we need, as Eugene also mentioned, that we need to cater for the rest of nature. We're just one species in this millions of species, on the earth there, which we need to respect. And we're actually just caretakers. So we should ensure that, we take just a fraction of what's needed for nature and then ensure that everything else is left for it, because the rate at which we're losing species and biodiversity in the world is just completely shocking. And the more we lose of biodiversity, the more issues we're going to, face, because already you can see that in the Himalayan region, due to ice melt, there are some 700 new viruses that are going to be exposed, and all these are going to come rolling down the mountains and hit us at some point in time. So how do we actually, I mean, just for safeguarding ourselves, not a question of keeping trees, as decorative elements, a very pretty forest, a very, pretty water bodies. It is in essence for us to survive. For those hardcore people who do not really understand or respect nature, I think you have to tell them that, if you don't, sorry, you're going to go. So that I think is, and the culture has in a way, shown that respect to whatever degree that it's put in these checks and balances, passed around from generation to generation. So we need to ensure that we draw from that, and as I said, religion is one way to actually embed this in knowledge in such a way that you actually draw and say, this was the true meaning of our spiritualism, and how we need to sort of take that on board and integrate it in our lifestyles. Yeah.
In fact, I had an experience. Like I wanted to save a tree, a people tree. I mean, like a banyan tree that was about to be cut in one of my project sites, and people could not, sort of, they wanted to remove it. So I had to use one of the, it's not a good thing, but it was very effective. I said, if we cut this tree, this is going to affect your many generations. That's all. It's very abstract sounding of just a threat that really helped. Then, I mean, people just, that was very effective, to save the tree. A threat telling them that it's going to affect many generations.
So maybe we should modify all these Vastu regulations. So if you cut a tree, your uncle's going to die or something like that.
It's Shab. I think Shab. It's called Shab, no?
Yes, it's called Shab.
Yeah, that was very effective. Yeah, that was very effective. That they just decided not to cut it.
It's interesting how as drivers of human behavior.
That's a very important cultural heritage, like that we have so many nice things,
Definitely, like how you said that we should actually threaten and scare people in a way to bring change, and how even Dean sir was telling about making it like a religion, so people will actually follow it. So what do you think about this, Trupti?
No, what the interesting point to note is that as drivers of human behavior or change in human behavior, there are two main emotions. One is fear and one is greed or love.
Yes.
So all of us, in the sustainability space are actually talking about hinging on the emotion of fear. Ye ho jayega, wo ho jayega, ye shrap lag jayega, all of that. And unfortunately, that is the one emotion that does drive change in behavior, because love is such a in that respect, loving nature. I mean, actually speaking, that should have been the thing. Love should have been the driver of change in behavior rather than fear. But yeah, we do accept the fact that right now fear is the driver. But as architects, is there a possibility whereby we can replace it over time with love for nature rather than fear of nature?
Yeah, I think I mean, look at the Bhumi Puja. I mean, if you look at the way it's conducted in such a sensitive manner, which you're actually asking forgiveness of the earth before you actually construct it, building is destructive. I mean, I remember, there was an aircraft that crashed in Goa. This was about 15 years ago. A trainer aircraft of the Navy, and it crashed into a building close to the airport. And I was landing a couple of days later, and I looked out of the window trying to figure out where is the building that was smashed. And I could identify 15 buildings that were smashed over there. And I looked closer, and they're construction sites. We look at the way we construct, the steel lying around, the cement lying, all this, the stone that we excavated the ground. They look like disaster sites. So architecture is destructive, So how do we actually evolve an architecture that's really sensitive to the ground and sort of grows like trees do, So I think that's a big challenge for us.
Yes, so architecture, throughout the life process, from the day it's built until it's destroyed, it needs to be sustainable from every aspect. That is very rightly said. Now, moving on to the next segment, architecture as an ecosystem. So, sustainability has varied aspects like social, economical, environmental, and human. So, how do we bring these aspects come together in a way? So, Trupti, ma'am, I had heard one of your talks where you had spoken about personifying buildings. So that kind of touches upon the human aspect. So how that is something that you touched upon, but how have you incorporated the other three elements, social, economic, and environmental, into your design?
Okay. So in all our projects, we, as Eugene sir was saying about the biodiversity mapping, we do an ecological study of where that place stands right now, and after the intervention, where that place will stand or has stood. So interestingly, in one of the projects, which was actually my first project straight out of college more than 20 years ago, where I decided to involve the local community, and because I wanted to learn architecture, and when I graduated from my college in Mumbai, I actually felt that even though whatever silly crowns we may have had during college of being the state topper and all that, actually speaking, I felt I knew nothing because there was hardly any on ground experience. And one of my mentors, he told me a very beautiful sentence. He said, Trupti, don't call yourself an architect until you can build an entire building from foundation to roof with your own hands. And that was such an inspiring sentence. And I took that up as a challenge in my first project, and it somehow turned out to be like a giant, more than a 1 lakh square feet project, where I decided not to employ a contractor, and I became like the person on the ground. And I employed over a period of, I think, 5 years, I ended up training about 450 local villagers in rammed earth, in compressed stabilized earth block, in Adobe, and in poured earth, and all these various kinds of technologies. So what was interesting is near about the same time, it was the tsunami in 2004. And the tsunami had wrecked so many kind of communities along the entire coast. So all these technologies that on the one hand they were getting trained in, they started using it to build their own homes. So ultimately it was like the project became the training ground, and I was actually doing a rural development project. So we were kind of restoring about 4 or 5 villages. So we ended up building 500 homes, etc. And with that technology all around, across a span of more than 47 villages, we could see, tens and dozens of structures coming up in that respect. So architecture as a driver of change, or architecture as a catalyst of better change, is something that I personally got to experience firsthand, and I was glad to be a part of that whole process. So society, definitely how to involve the community, and as Baker so beautifully did, of involving the community. And of course ecology. So that is where we all are driving at. And that is, ecological conservation is non-negotiable in architecture. And in a certain sense, I also feel that the certification bit does help, because what gets measured gets managed. So even though as architects, we may know the impact of it, but to a client or to the end user, if one is able to say it, like for example, in my own office building, we managed to mitigate. So, I mean, in carbon, we talk about mitigation, which is the actual reduction of embodied carbon, versus offset, so you plant equivalent number of trees, or you do solar panels, you run it through renewables, etc. So mitigation and offset, these are the two terms that we use in carbon. So in my own office building, I mitigated about 102 tons of carbon dioxide at the embodied carbon level. And when I was telling, my colleagues that, the whole calculation that the scientists gave us is 102 tons of carbon dioxide, and they are like, what is 102 tons of carbon dioxide? And then I did some research and I said, 102 tons of carbon dioxide mitigation is the equivalent of the work of 40 acres of forest land over a period of 1 year. Now, when I say that, a 7,500 square feet building has done the equivalent work of 40 acres of forest land over a period of 1 year. Now, that becomes powerful, as a means of communication. Like Dean's Africa example, that's so powerful. So similarly, if we are able to communicate these concepts to the community, to the people for whom we are building, to the end users, then ecology becomes there is a lot more buy-in from the customer when he is able to understand the impact of our work. So from all the aspects, it has to be holistic, involve society, involve ecology, and make it profitable for the end user.
See, this
Definitely,
carbon calculations have is to some extent is somewhat justifiable, but it's not true. Equating carbon emissions with acres of land, acres of forest and all that. It's nice to hear. We are very happy to hear that. It's giving good, fantastic. We have done that, but to make us happy, it's good. But still, it is carbon. Trees are trees. It does much more than carbon. It's basically we are just translating everything into carbon. It's a comfortable way for us to do it, and that's the only way we can do about it. But 100 acres of a tree is just not. We cannot equate it to carbon. That's the difference. And initiatives, this kind of carbon emissions equated initiatives is the kind of way in which we are thinking about. That's the only way. This equating, or how much energy that we use, embodied energy calculations, and what we produce. But I don't. It's not convincing for me. It's not convincing at all. This kind
I understand.
of,
I understand
greening.
your point, Eugene.
Yeah.
I understand your point. The thing is that otherwise we end up in echo chambers preaching to the converted. What we are doing is a lot more as architects. When we are approaching it with an ecological lens, we are doing a lot more. But as the end user, the audience who doesn't understand the entire thought process that goes behind it, unless we can talk to the audience in their language, they are not going to buy into what we are trying to say. So
Yeah,
from
for
that
industries, it's fine.
perspective,
Yeah.
from that very limited perspective, and I'm not saying that's the whole of it, but from the very limited perspective, I saw that all the 100 people who were going to use the building had an instant buy. They suddenly had that sense of ownership in the building. Oh, we have to look after this, so it's about also cultivating a sense of ownership in the buildings that people end up using. That's a very important aspect of our work as well.
Yeah, Trupti, you mentioned this thing of your building got 104 points or whatever in LEED or something. Which, I know a way to get 200 points of LEED, and that is not building at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course.
So we really need to question the need for building at times. So how do we really need to build? How can we sort of recycle old buildings? How can we, sort of repurpose them? Because that's essential. Because right now we're driven by this thing with new buildings, and it's very difficult to mitigate, the damage that we do. So can we actually look at how do we multi-purpose spaces? Whatever you design, can we actually multi-purpose spaces? If you look at the PPP models that, say, the UK uses, they ensure that every building which is in a private-public partnership model has at least 3 uses to it. So for example, if it's a school building, if it's say occupied from say 8 in the morning, say to 2 in the afternoon, whatever, beyond 2 o'clock, can it be used as for other community activities? In the evening, can it be used for say, the elderly or whatever? So all these uses come into play. Or in the weekend, can it be put to another purpose? And that's really sensitively multi-purposing spaces, and that immediately reduces, our footprint, on the environment. So we really need to think of these out-of-the-box ways to really achieve that. And really, one looks at, how do we convince, people that this is to show classic examples. I mean, there was a chapel which needed to be renovated in Goa, and they asked me that we need an extension to the chapel because the congregation has, increased, almost doubled. And so I went over there, and it's a very pretty looking building, and I said, it's really a pity to destroy it. So I told the priest, it's only on pressure for Sunday morning masses. So I said, okay, fine. What about the north of the village?
Make two masses.
Yeah, 2 masses. So 8 o'clock you have the north of the village, and 9 o'clock you have the south of the village. And it's a simple solution. It's not even it is architectural in a way, because you're thinking out of the box. Architecture is about solutions. It's not about making buildings. Yeah? So how do you provide solutions without actually having to make buildings? Yeah? So that's the way to multi-purposing, not building at all. So recycling stuff. So I think we need to really think out of the box with these solutions, not just make them green in a way. Yeah.
See, natural heritage has to be given more importance. Like destroying natural heritage, whatever is there, given to us. So intervention and whether we should build natural heritage is to be conserved. We are very much after conservation of cultural heritage. But natural heritage has also has got a lot of intangible things there, which we have to, like what you said. It's better not to build anything, and you get. I don't know how you get 200 points without building.
Also,
yeah.
I think it's also very important to think when, so you were talking about reusing buildings, and natural and the heritage buildings are really important buildings which can be reused. But I know there are so many people, so many homeowners or these heritage property owners who are not able to economically support maintenance of these buildings. I'm not saying that building a new is the answer to this, but what I'm saying is that having an economic strength to be able to support an old building is very important. And I think we need to find solutions to make something like maintenance of these buildings more affordable for the end users, because there are so many people I know who actually deliberately break the building so that they are able to build a new. So which is very hard, which is very disturbing, because they also don't understand that they are sort of killing the cultural aspect of the building also. The time when it was built, when it was a new building, the kind of elements that were used culturally into the building also has a story to tell today in today's times. So we are losing that as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
like buildings, like it's beyond like a physical form. There is a story. It has a soul in it. So that doesn't answer like just destroying the building or heritage doesn't answer it. We need to preserve it, and that comes to our next segment on restoration and natural building. So, when you are talking about restoration and adaptive reuse, and Trupti ma'am had rightly said about greed and how people are over consuming everything. So, how do you make? So, do you think like when it comes to restoration, or is it actually the solution when it comes is a better sustainable alternative as compared to building new?
Absolutely, 100%. There are no two ways about it. Adaptive reuse is any day better than building a new. I mean, that's a no-brainer, because whatever resources both man and material have gone into creating that building, whatever economic and natural resources have gone, I mean, it's always better to adaptively reuse that structure rather than building a new. In fact, durability should be one of the very important criteria of sustainable building. I mean, how can it be durable if you have to keep replacing it every now and again and keep reusing more and more resources to build and rebuild the same thing again and again? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think what we really think, most of us think as architecture as something which is permanent. There may be some typologies that need permanence, maybe something religious, whatever. But if you look at Hampi, for example, Hampi is only the religious and the sort of the king's quarters, which are really permanent in nature. There was an edict, in fact, to say that all the housing for that thing, all the common people, actually lived in temporary wooden houses, and that's of course what led to the destruction of Hampi. They were mostly temporary structures there. So can we look at an architecture that's temporal in nature? Can we look at an architecture which is meant only for a certain period of time, and in which you can dismantle, which you can build quickly, and we've actually achieved that. I mean, sometimes in projects we've done, say, in hospitality. For example, we built a sort of 40-seater restaurant for the Taj, and it cost us 9 lakhs, and they earned 50,000 rupees a night, from the thing. Of course, it's a high-end project. So they've covered the cost of the building in 2 weeks. And in hospitality, it's all about how many years will it take to cost to cover. And in a normal hotel building, it'll probably take you about 8 to 10 years to actually cover the cost of the building and start really earning money from it. And now if you can cover the cost of your building in 2 weeks, that's really attractive. So even if it means just replacing it every year, that's perfectly all right, because your costs are minimal. And a lot of our costs go into capital intensive finances. So if we do not have that, if we build faster, and that's the reason why temporary structures are becoming popular, because your capital loss in the time of buildings normally take 2, 3, 4 years, especially if it's something bigger, even more. So you're investing so much money and not really earning from it till the time it's complete. So something which has a shorter building time will obviously be far more attractive. And we are slowly turning towards buildings which are quicker to build, and we're introducing the technologies and materials to achieve that. So can we look at an architecture which is temporary in nature, which can be dismantled? So that's, I think, is a way to go. And we actually look at materials like steel, for example. So this is a material which can be dismantled, and even though it has an initial high embodied energy, the fact that it can be recycled and put into it, so you can actually dismantle a building, probably sell it for more than it cost you to build. Whereas concrete doesn't offer that prospect. So it's basically you need to dismantle a concrete building, it's worth the rubble of landfill. So how do we actually create an architecture which you can slowly change? And you see the buildings now, they're becoming redundant quicker and quicker. I mean, before buildings lasted 40 years, you don't need. Now malls are being changed into hospitals and other institutional buildings, because certain malls fail. So what do you use for it? So they need to be designed to use some other public purpose, whatever. So how do we actually create buildings which can change over time, be morphed without having to dismantle them completely? So I think that sensitivity needs to come in both in the choice of the way we shape our buildings, the materials we use, the technologies we use. And technologies also are constantly changing. We see, electrical systems, mechanical systems, sanitary systems. Everything is being slowly upgraded. New systems coming in. So our buildings need to be able to respond to these, new plugins that are coming to the market.
So speaking about restoration, so is it important that we actually understand the function and retain the function of the building, or can we go with a different function or evolve over time? Like the structure remains the same. Like suppose it's a palace and then you restore it to into a hotel right now. So what do you think about this, please?
Yeah, I mean, like I gave them all example. Definitely, something can change into a completely new, usage, but it has to be designed in such a way that it can adapt to that, new use easily, and that becomes you're just being sustainable, because rather than dismantle that building.
See,
Yeah, Eugene.
yeah, I mean, I agree to what you said. Whatever new buildings we make we should do it in such a way that we should be able to reuse the whole thing again. But this beautiful heritage structures that we have, especially the buildings that you have in Goa, the houses and the old Goan houses, I really love it, And we have now, fortunately, we have good technologies to keep it, for thousands of years. that's a good thing that we should use. I mean, that's a good technology that we should use. One is retrofitting, thought very intelligently retrofitting the whole structures, old heritage structures which are worthy of keeping it, like the old Goan houses or some of the beautiful heritage that we have all over the country. A mud structure, which is just which can just go, go away because we are not managing the roof properly. We have leak. If we have a leaky roof, the buildings go. I mean, it affects the building. So if there are a lot of technologies by which we can, just stop the leaking by, giving another layer, which can help us to keep the building maybe 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, or more. And we can tweak the interiors by, reconfiguring it. And we have amazing technologies to sort of reconfigure the inside and keeping most of the resources intact. And whatever we what we are pulling down, we can reuse it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
whatever
resources, what we are using, if we can, take it out carefully, reuse it, and put the appropriate right kind of thing for when you're replacing a laterite, block. If we could put the right kind of replacement instead of don't go for concrete or cement, but the right kind of mix, that maybe blocks of mud or mix of that, and and show the interventions boldly and shamelessly show it, and do all this kind of interventions. And go in. I mean, you can just. I know you are getting very impatient.
Yeah. So because I'm sensitive.
The roof.
Yeah.
The roof is a main problem with your Goan houses. That.
Yeah, no,
it's very leaky. In fact, Baker's house also. Yeah, Baker's buildings also have the same problem now because they are starting conservation. Yeah, they're starting, thinking about, because Baker told this idea of only 30 years for his. They said, Baker used to tell us that, we need this building only for 30 years. And I used to ask him, what are you going to do after that? Oh, we'll just demolish it and use it. But that's not the right way of doing it. Baker's buildings are so beautiful that we can't just think about demolishing it. We somehow have to keep it. And the problem is only in the roof. Okay,
there's a lot more wrong than beyond the roof as well. So with the Goan architecture, it's very pretty, no doubt. But the roof responds not as well as a Kerala. In fact, our architecture has morphed more into a Kerala sort of architecture, which is far more responsible.
It's Portuguese. It is Portuguese. Basically,
it's a Portuguese influence, which is basically this thing. It's a elitist thing of we want this thing of power and sort of presence in the architectural landscape. So Goan buildings actually don't ventilate very well. I mean, the windows are small. There's very poor overhangs over the windows. They're very pretty looking buildings, but there's no escape for the hot air, unlike a Kerala architecture.
We can do it by tweaking it, small changes.
Yeah, we can exactly. So that's what we do in architecture. We make sure that
we should do. That's what we can do. That's the best way to keep a building is to give
about things. So we look at what tradition offers and we tweak it
in Kerala. Kerala also you have the same problem, because nowadays the climate change is really affecting the old buildings. Heritage buildings, you have very little ventilation because they had only very small windows those days. But in Goa, you have very large windows. In Kerala, we have no washrooms. In Kerala, we don't have in-house. I mean, there was traditional houses, they didn't have washrooms. No, we provide open to sky washrooms and they're happy. Like that, So you can make it really usable and functional, retrofit it. I say that it's a lot of exciting. It's an exciting thing to get an old building and just play with it and have fun with it, use it.
Yeah, which I think is as you said, it's a learning experience, especially for a young architect because you've got a template, a framework in which to build upon. So it's nice to actually do restoration work in that area and really address the points which need to be taken on board, whether it's make it more convenient by adding, say, washrooms or whatever else, improving the lighting and ventilation, the functionality of the space. I think that's an interesting challenge to have.
Interestingly, the example that Dean just gave about that mall to hospital is the exact thing that we did last month. So we are designing this west side in Trupti, and the client told me that, you know, these people have signed a contract for about 15 years. So I asked him that after 15 years, what's going to happen to this building? So he's like, oh, I don't know that. Maybe we'll give it to a hospital. So I was like, oh, you know what? If you're giving it to a hospital, let's build in the lift shaft for a stretcher lift now itself, and let's put in a smaller lift if need be now, and we can still have the stretcher lift at a later date. So how we can, not only existing buildings we can adaptively reuse later on, but even new buildings that we are constructing, how we can plan such that we can reuse it as something else at a later date if that current use is not possible.
So will the multiplex become an operation theatre?
Well, yeah, it could absolutely, because today hospitals have to look like hotels, right?
No, actually, this 20 years, beyond 20 years is it'd be very difficult to think about, you know, because surgery and all these things are going to happen, you know, it can happen into your house. Robotic things can, you know, come to your house and do your surgery and all that. So, I mean, visionaries talk like that about, we can't just predict what is going to happen to them, because AI is so good that they can just put something in your mouth and that will do all the work for you. Surgery, or, you know, going and removing the tumor from that particular place. And AI is talking about so many things that we can't go beyond. I mean, we are not smart enough as the AI.
So, like speaking about restoration, like Eugene sir had you had spoken about fixing the issue. Like suppose there's a house with a leakage issue. So what we see currently, like most buildings, when it comes to restoration, they are not mindful about the materials. They just try to fix the solution. Like suppose the building is made of wood, and then they use concrete or some other material to fill up the solution. So what do you think about this? Since you have the experience in restoring traditional houses in Kerala. So, what is your take on this?
I mean, it's I feel the traditional houses, you know, they have very simple problems, like, you know, the height of the roof is not like government houses. You know, they have very 6 feet. You can't put a fan inside. So I have been lifted the entire roof by the required height by using jacks, and it's possible. It's not this technology. If you use technology, we can use a lot of things to tweak the things that we want. And in internal rooms, you know, the Kerala's traditional houses. Kerala means like Travancore region. We had smaller rooms with smaller windows and no washrooms. Kitchen was very like our traditional, that firewood kitchen. Then leakage. These things can be tackled without much of difficulty. We make it larger rooms. We just combine two rooms and make them bigger ones. It's possible too. There are a lot of solutions which we can be very creative in that. I think the younger generation is pretty good managing that kind of spaces. The roof is the main issue with Goan houses and Kerala's. You know, if you have a broken roof, water comes in and it destroys the timber structure, and that gradually takes away the structural system and it fails.
So really, what's
Very
happening?
yes.
Yeah. So
Yes,
across
yes.
the world, really, since we're looking at an architecture which is, you know, using traditional systems. So what we find, especially in Southeast Asia, is a sort of hybrid architecture. An architecture which has a certain level of permanence, so which may be a concrete frame, a steel frame, whatever. And then you have these elements of, you know, a local craftsmanship. So whether it's, you know, a thin mud wall, like, or, you know, any other sort of thatch-like material, which can be used for your walling system. So, and possibly even the lightweight roofing system, which is a traditional system. So there is a combination of something. Because the problem with say some with traditional architecture at times is the stability, the nature of its stability. So can you actually create a much more stable, say, modern material framework, and then you infill it with materials which can provide local embedding of local craftsmanship into the building. And this is becoming quite popular because you come up with your structure fast enough, and you're leaving space for the craftsperson and the livelihood attached to it to come into your building.
Definitely, very rightly said. So let's move on to the next segment about large scale adaptation and sustainability. So here we are looking into a bigger picture of sustainability. So the what we mainly see is that sustainable architecture is more common in rural areas than urban. It has a major impact in the rural areas. So how do you think we can maximize this impact in the urban areas? How can we bring about the sustainability aspect into urban areas as well?
So there was this engineer, sorry, I keep on going first away, but there was this engineer actually based in Bombay who actually worked with laminated wood, where in rural areas you take actually waste wood and create this lamination, with glues and with, say, steel binding wires, and creating sections, beam sections especially, which are stronger than steel. So these would be actually made and manufactured in rural areas and could be transported to urban areas. So almost like a prefab building system, structural system, and buildings. Of course, it was just left in study format. It didn't really, wasn't really executed, but it's a great collaborative process between rural and urban. So you could have across. So a lot of our waste materials, which we say produce in urban areas, can be taken to rural areas and recycled and put into something which is useful in the building industry. And in a similar manner, you can actually, whatever is produced in rural areas it can be used in urban areas. So if one creates a symbiotic relationship between urban and rural, I think that's a great way of actually, solving a lot of our problems. And since you mentioned the thing of how do we actually, you know, look at what's happening and create an architecture that's meaningful today. Now we look at, say, the funding that the government has. There's this funding for the poor in rural areas. They give 5 lakhs for a house, as a sort of grant. And the problem with that is they want a pakka house. Now, what is a pakka house? Pakka house means, again, concrete and bricks and things like that. They're not restoring traditional systems, which are more effective. These pakka houses heat. You need a contractor to build it. So you're taking away livelihoods of the people who could have actually built their own houses. So can you actually create livelihoods in which they can build their own? It's strong enough. It is virtually pakka in a way, but not in the traditional PW definition of pakka. So I think we need to address these policy issues if we are to be effective, in sustainability especially. And these are large-scale areas. It may be a very small house, but it's multiplied by, lakhs and lakhs of houses. So it has a major impact. So policies need to be tweaked. How can we create trade schools in rural areas that will actually learn to build in a traditional method, which again reduce the sort of footprints that we have, the ecological footprints, impacts that we have in rural areas. So we need to look at these large numbers. So we concentrate in sustainability only in urban areas, but I think the big impact is really in the bigger numbers outside in rural areas. Yeah.
Yes, so it's very rightly said. It's about bringing about the technology to the urban areas as well. So, Shipra, what do you think about this perspective?
I think um, urban areas do need that change. People are getting more and more aware about this. I think one of the techniques which we have been experimenting with in urban areas is CSEB, and Bangalore has been doing that since quite some time, and a lot of other places in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka as well. um, these techniques are built on the site. These bricks are built on the site and then used. I think space, being really space conscious in an urban environment is the largest issue that we face today. So I think if we are able to work around it and use these kind of techniques and improvise on it and build better designs, then we definitely should be able to acquire more and more of the urban market. Yes.
Since
What
you
about
mentioned the
yes?
Shipra, sorry to intervene. So we will offer a school in Rajasthan close to Udaipur, in fact, where there's a tradition of stone masonry over there. But there was also soil available which didn't affect ground topsoil, which was there. So we actually got these Astra Ram block machines, and started building. Of course, the project is being handled now by a colleague of mine who used to work with us before. And so by building in mud blocks, you're actually training a new segment of people. And you're not just building that one school, you're creating an ecosystem for these people to take it forward into other schools. Because now they can say, okay, fine, I can build in mud block. No doubt we have stone, but this is also an alternative material. So you're creating a livelihood. And sustainability needs to be linked to livelihood creation. And if you look at the unemployment ratio that we have in India, it's rising and rising because of an industrialization that's taking place. There are no small time things. It's constantly going to bigger and bigger corporate houses, all the work. So how can we actually reduce that and actually come down and break it up into areas where you have small scale entrepreneurs who can actually take on the building industry, because that's where actually you can provide them a good sustenance. So can we actually give back to this building? We never had architects before. We never had developers before. It was all built by the people. So can we actually restore that system? And I think it's our bound duty as architects to be able to restore traditional systems if we are talking about sustainability, because it's about continuing traditional systems which are easily accessible, yet still easily accessible, but it's fast dying. So before it does, get completely decimated, we need to sort of, save it and restore it in some way.
Another aspect about this urban rural debate, is that what is appropriate in one region may not be appropriate in another region. We have to accept that. Like I remember a group of architects who had come to one of my building sites where we were doing everything out of rammed earth and compressed stabilized earth blocks. And then they went back to their city and they had to transport soil from some 200 kilometers to their site and then build blocks out of it. I mean, how is that sustainable? You're transporting you're spending so much carbon emission in transport. So we have to be very wary of the fact that what is appropriate is sustainable in that place.
Yes, definitely. Like it's about like you need to understand the materials in that space and what is appropriate in that context. That makes more sense, like than about this rural urban aspect as well. So coming to the urban scenario itself, there is a rapid urbanization. Considering the rapid urbanization in most cities, how do architecture respond to the need of density and sustainability at the same time? So there are a lot of highly dense areas. How do we incorporate sustainability in such scenarios?
See, sustainability is, I mean, if one were to look at the tangibles of sustainability, then water resource management is one big aspect, and then of course materials is one big aspect. So in the urban areas, one thing that is definitely doable, I mean, even if you can't make, let's say the example that I gave, even if you can't have stabilized earth blocks for the walls, you can definitely work upon water waste energy. So resource management is a big component in urban sustainability, which definitely can be done. And yes, for technologies which require more space, like in CSEB, we require a yard to make the bricks. That may or may not be possible in the urban region. So we select what is appropriate over there. But resource management is definitely something which is very doable in an urban scenario.
What do you think about this, Shipra?
Well, I think what Trupti ma'am says is absolutely correct. That resource management is really important, and what is available is extremely important to understand and work around those materials which are available. Um, there are lots and lots of examples where I have also known where people are building in Kota, they are building earth buildings, but getting bricks from Bangalore and building. So how is this? How is this really a valid way to build? And so I think what is really important is not just the owners of the building, but the architects who are actually designing these buildings, and how aware they are, and how how can they actually put their point forward in front of a client. Because rightly said, sustainability has become a buzzword today. Everyone who wants to build a new house wants to be sustainable, because that's the narrative they want to create around their house, especially if it's a hospitality project or even a residential project. But are you really able to attain that kind of sustainability is the question. Are you, and what sustainability really means to you also is actually so varied in today's times. So I think it's very important to first have that narrative cleared and then able to approach it that way is what needs to be addressed.
Definitely. It's about how you define it in a way. And Eugene, so what do you think about this aspect?
See, cities by 2050, we are going to double the population. That is from rural area. It is going to. I mean, we are going to exceed the proportion of the population in urban area. That's a lot. In fact, that is going to also increase the carbon emissions in the city from the city, and I find it. I mean, I feel that it's transforming it suddenly with this kind of natural materials is going to be a big challenge. So, I mean, in cities, I always think that we have very efficient kind of systems. Like vertical systems are very efficient, and elevators are very efficient in terms of energy usage. So, building tall structures can reduce the footprint a lot. Though I'm against high-rise buildings, I was in for low-rise, low. But we are human beings are so bad. Like we don't take care of the nature. So I feel we keep the footprint, go tall, and do less destruction, less of spreading out. But you can think about sustainable materials as infills, like all this partition walls and all the things that is possible with the best possible material. We can use it. But structurally, graphene is coming. That's what I'm waiting for. Very efficient tensile structure that can revolutionize the kind of technology that we use.
What material is this, Eugene?
Graphene, carbon-based. Say just the size of your hair. You can hang a piano if you have that size of it. That kind of tensile strength it has.
I think one
They
thing
say
that
it's coming.
Yeah, one thing that
that's coming.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm telling that whatever is technologies that whatever we can the way in which we can reduce the footprint in the cities and allow the biodiversity to happen around, because we don't give that much of importance for others. So let's go vertical. We can use the elevators and come down. Use the horizontal underground systems to traverse and allow that, and don't destroy the nature. Don't destroy the villages, and keep everything green around us. I mean, that is a shortcut. That's a shortcut, I feel.
There are multiple viewpoints.
It's not
on this.
ideal thing. Yeah, it's not idealistic, but
so densification, of course, is one way. They say is you can actually, by compressing people into a small space, you can save the landscape outside. But there are
just like
challenges.
the white ants. It's like the white ants. I mean, see the efficiency of their structure. It's so many stories. When you have not achieved anything, even 10% of the efficiency that they have achieved inside that kind of termite structures.
The challenges are at the end of the day, we're not white ants, we're human beings. So I think a disconnect from the land is something which makes living in a city quite daunting. I mean, the sort of pollution levels, noise levels. I mean, they say that if you live, the difference between living in a rural area and an urban area is living in a rural area adds 5 years to your life, and it's not just a question of 5 years; it's a question of also your health along the way. So, how much of an urbanization in India can we take? We need to really look at, because our cities are becoming denser and denser, and it's challenging all our resources, water, power, everything. And the trauma that we face of, cities, simple traveling from one part. I'm in Bombay at the moment, and getting one place to the other is a nightmare. In every city, we're facing this big challenge of, Bangalore with Delhi traffic and moving around, and it stresses us out. So urban life is definitely, and Luckily, in India, I think we're right now at about 35% urban, and about 65% rural. Most of the European countries are close to 70% urban, but their infrastructure is far better than us. We do not have that infrastructure to support it, and unfortunately, we're having this mode of smart cities, and smart city movements are just mitigations in these small interventions, almost beautification exercises in sort of improving the quality of life, but they're not very effective. But so can we actually have smart villages? Villages can be densified. So we take densification up to a certain level. In fact, they say high density, low rise is actually far better than low footprint high rise buildings, because even in terms of energy usage, your connection to the ground, the way you use your open space effectively. So all that is, we need to really look at urban planning if we are looking at. So architecture is just a small fragment of solving problems of sustainability. I think we can have far-reaching impacts if we really address it from a planning level, from a landscape level, and then decide what sort of architecture do we really need. And only with that will we really have impactful and meaningful results in sustainability, I feel.
See, in Kerala, we have this problem, like, say urban sprawl, right from Trivandrum to Kasargod. We have a small agglomeration of small towns, urban centers linked together. The entire place is urbanized. And, houses, you have a house with minimum 10 cents of land around it, that kind of thing. Low density, low rise, and bungalow type of development spread throughout. And all these paddy fields are being converted to housing, plotted developments and things like that. But, we are, nobody is taking care, nobody is cultivating. Even if you have a small piece of land around you, you don't make edible things around you. Like, you just pave it around, you put concrete blocks, pave it so that the water doesn't go inside. You have to depend on water. That kind of, there's a lot to say about this kind of bad practices, unfortunately. So that is the reason why I say that we can think about. I don't know whether you've seen these houses that those houses which have come recently with house and no trees, but with concrete blocks, draining the water to the street. That kind of pretty heat. Amazing. Too much of heat build-up. Terrible kind of thing. So spreading out low rise, I feel we have to think differently. I don't know what it is like, but a lot of thought process have to come in.
Low rise, about 4 to 5 stories, and that's been found through studies that that's an efficient height where you actually reducing.
But
the amount
still,
of,
it's not working. That's a problem.
It's a question of how it's designed. Really, it's a bit. But these are numbers that we've seen. Especially I like to live close to nature. Don't like high rise at all. But if you have a good, principled lifestyle, small rise, small houses, broadacre concept of Frank Lloyd Wright is perfect. But that doesn't work now. Everyone is lazy. They don't even go out for a walk.
So, speaking about technology, like you had introduced us to graphene and different technologies. So that comes up to the last question of this event, this panel discussion. So with these sustainable these technologies and how it is coming up with the advancements of technology, how do you think how do you see the future of sustainable architecture when it comes to integration of technology into sustainability?
I think as architects, we need to walk the talk in a way. So how do we actually demonstrate it in our own lifestyle? My own office, of course, we're off the grid. We have solar panels. We're using alternative materials. I used to drive electric cars, the small, cheap electric cars, the Revas before. Very painful, very slow. But we just want to show that that's a possibility. Not that electrics are, the complete solution to it, but at least it's pushing in the right direction and showing people that we can do it. It may take a little sort of sacrifices here and there. But I think if we can demonstrate it ourselves, I think we can make about change, because people do look to us in a way as change makers. And we need to restore our role as visionaries for the future. Right now, we're just one cog in the wheel. I mean, term architect, of chief designer is, we've lost. We just it's now the developer who's the chief in everything, who decides what it is. So we need to restore that and say that we have a vision for the future, and this is our vision, which it looks at sustainability without the sort of other connotations and that sustainability has with it. But sustainability is it's not an alternative; it is the way to go. And if we can demonstrate that ourselves and show that it's a practical way, it's not a question about saving the planet or being altruistic in the way you sort of deal with the world around you, but it's sensible. So I think that's what we need to really demonstrate.
So does anyone have to add about this regarding this question?
Well, I think I have two very diverse opinions on this. I think we also need to look back if we look at the future. Skill-based work is really important. Technology is not the only thing that we need to look at for a better future. It's skilling, looking back at the vernacular techniques which architecture had, the craft techniques which it had. It could be working with lime, it could be working with mud, it could be working with terracotta, anything. But teaching back and getting these techniques into mainstream architecture is what should be a way forward. And then using technology to improvise on these vernacular techniques is what can be a way to look at, according to me. One example that I read recently, a few months back, was IE University. I think it was in somewhere in Europe, worked on an augmented reality project where students from Princeton University and IE University worked together, and they built a vault using augmented reality as a tool. So bringing back techniques like vaults and arches into our everyday architectural homes reduces the need of concrete beams and columns. A very simple way of looking at architecture. And using augmented reality reduces the need to have casts, which reduces the kind of material we're using to build these vaults historically. So this is something which we can look at if we are looking at future through technology.
Absolutely, I do agree with you regarding that. So let's go back to the last segment, which is the individual questions. To each one of you, I'll be asking one question. So let's start with Dean sir. In your 30 years in Goa, how has the relationship between architecture and nature changed? And how has it shaped your approach to designing sustainable spaces?
Yeah, it's not 30 years, it's 40 years in Goa. So
40 years, sorry.
Yeah, so I think it's, when I was now in college, I mean, I was a technologist. I sort of enjoyed the technology, new materials, new sort of new technologies plugging into buildings. But when I came to Goa, that whole thing changed. The whole approach became a much softer sort of crafted architecture. But now I'm actually looking at a hybrid in a way. So we work in the jungle where we're looking at how do we actually create something that's, say, lightweight, for example. So can we use roofing systems which are far more lightweight than the traditional roofing system, because in the jungle you also have challenges of say monkeys and other small creatures getting into the building. How do you see that? Traditional architecture doesn't offer that security. So how can you actually put a little bit of technology into the jungle and use it in a subtle manner so it doesn't really stand out? So it's really, I think it's being responsive to whatever materials that we have and the technology that we have at hand, and being just sensible about how do we integrate it, and not being very strict and saying, no, I'm only going to use a natural material, and it's not the way. So if a particular material, for example, wood, if it's not available, it's not the right material to use, even though it's been used traditionally when there were plenty of trees, we look at an alternative and say, can we use this material because it's sensible, it's we can and still create, say, a livelihood around it, and make sure that the energy we use is less. So I think it means thinking a project through in a way, and I think it's looking at how much can we pass on the good word in a way. So can we use this project as a catalyst for others to actually take cues from and start changing things? So the question is, how do you share it sensitively? How do you bring other people on board? So while my office is downsized, we're actually looking at collaborations outside. So can we engage with the younger architects and actually show them the ropes of how these can be done? And I think as a fraternity of architects, we need to show that. I mean, there's nothing exclusive about the way we practice. Everything is a shared knowledge that we need to ensure that other people actually benefit from it if we are to really be effective. And I think the fact that I'm now engaged in academics as well is one way in which I try to achieve that. So showcasing our projects, we're working with curricula that can change the way students learn, because what we have at the present moment is curriculum that is fairly outdated. So can we change curriculum to actually look at sustainability in a way which is it needs to be looked at, and not as a subject, which is integrated with everything that's part of the learning process. So I think that's the basic change that I've seen in myself.
Definitely, yes. Your journey have shaped your way of approach throughout your life, I guess. So moving on to Eugene, sir, with your career in hospitality sector, mainly Ravis, and there are a lot of hospitality projects that you have worked on. So what are some of the challenges that you have faced when integrating these sustainability principles in hospitality sector?
Yeah, challenges. Hospitality sector is one area where you can showcase your ideas and you can teach sort of you can express your ideas so that people can enjoy it, and especially your ideas if your client is also good. The client has to agree with what you're doing. Like in Ravis, let's say 5-star deluxe property, where they didn't agree with my idea of using mud, but I used I did a retaining wall with mud. That was only a space that I could, do a mud wall. Still, it's looking so beautiful. But other places like in the north, I was able to bring in basically storytelling about the culture and the cultural heritage and the natural heritage. I always love to do a journey through give an experience to the client, to the people who stay there. A journey through the cultural and natural heritage of the region. So that way, it really helps the local traditional way of building the structures, and in that project, that community around that project, I make it a point to understand the cultural heritage, not only just architecture but also the cuisines. I enjoy, I try out all this kind of niceties that is there, and I about achars and all that. I tell my clients, these things can be tried out, and it's quite it's a good learning experience for me, and the clients also will get excited about learning about more of that kind of thing, and the biodiversity that's available there in Madhya Pradesh. In Panna, I did 2 projects. One was for a European client, and the other one was jungle resort, where my client agreed to build the landscape as a forest, regenerating the forest, the local plants, and helping the biodiversity around that, using waste timber and natural other materials and all that. So there's a lot of opportunity in make the long story short, engaging the local craftsmen to do nice work with whatever enjoyable. And even I used to work with my client to see that the local people are engaged in that as laborers. Okay, and also to procure products from the village. That kind of total integrating sustainability, taking it to a next to another level. Calling it responsible tourism. That's what people say. So it's this hospitality projects are really a lot of fun doing it. In Rajasthan also I could enlighten to work with my client. He became a very good person now who now promotes sustainability, using local materials and working well with it. Young person, client, who is now a very strong promoter of sustainability. Like so. So there's a lot of fun doing hospitality projects with the best possible clients. Best means the right people, or you can just try to convert them. Some of them, most of them really gets converted. Understand the potential of sustainable, because certain projects, which like Dean said, you spend very little and you can actually just earn it within a couple of months, because they sell it for a building which costs them maybe 20 lakhs per key. They make it in 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. That kind of possibility is there.
Yes, it's about about
Affordable.
experience. Yes, affordable experiences. So the last two questions to Shipra and Trupti, I'll just get into it and then we can wind up the session. So to Trupti Doshi, with the increase in eco-conscious design trends, do you worry about greenwashing in architecture, and how can the industry combat it effectively?
So as Shipra was mentioning about sustainability being a buzzword, like every other person on every other website which doesn't have anything to do with sustainability is saying that they are sustainable, right? So it's become like a lingo, an abused word or a overused word, whatever you may call it. So it's all of this is definitely greenwashing. And over here, I think the idea of metrics of sustainability plays a very important role. Are we able to define the metrics of sustainability in architecture? So in the sense that, like, now IGBC has come up with this net zero certification, right? Until now it was only the lead, the platinum and the gold and all. Now they are coming up with net zero. So if we are able to really show the metrics of sustainability, I think that can reduce the greenwashing. And definitely I'd love to see more and more products displaying actively what benefit they have or what impact they have created on the environment when they are calling themselves sustainable. And so this is from the delivery side, from the product side. From the consumer side, definitely more and more awareness on the part of the consumer will make the vendor or the service provider more responsible. I mean, if the user is asking more intelligent questions, then this guy has to give more authentic answers. So I think from both sides, from the delivery side, from the point of view of the product manufacturers, from the point of view of service providers, as well as from the end user point of view, all the three segments need to step up in order to avoid greenwashing and in order to have more authentic products and services which are genuinely sustainable.
Yes, you're absolutely right about that aspect. It's especially like when it comes to the products, when you said rightly said. So Shipra, this is the last question. Having started your journey in environmentally conscious designs, what are some of its challenges or practical adaptations for accommodating modern needs?
There are many, but one which I would like to point out is you know how users are behaving when it comes to natural buildings or sustainably more conscious buildings. I think there needs to be a a more aware adaptation of how you actually live with these buildings. People need to understand that a building which is more consciously built is not just a building you're living in or using it, but it's also a piece in itself. It has a life. It changes through time. It lives through weathers. It might change the way it look, and be able to adapt that change and embrace that change, more importantly, is what I think is the most tough part when we look at environment conscious buildings in today's modern times. So if that change, that adaptation, and that respect to these buildings start happening, then I think it's going to be a big challenge achieved by at least me.
Definitely. So that comes to an end of our panel discussion. We had come across, like, we started with the redefining aspect, where we spoke about what are the different meanings of sustainability, and then we spoke about LEED certification and how it has, there is a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to sustainable architecture. And we even explored about the Indian culture and how it has been like deeply rooted to sustainability. And then we also spoke about in a larger perspective. So I hope you all had a great time in this discussion, because I definitely did. So thank you so much for being part of this session. We are truly honored to have you all here.
Lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Bye.
much. It was a pleasure sharing
Bye.
this platform and talking to
Thanks.
you all.
Thanks.
Yes.
Lovely
I
insights.
love
Thanks.
it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.